Howdy neighbor, and how is your garden growing? Today in my garden, we're going to be talking about the vegetables, fruits, and flowers you should be thinking about growing in the month of May in your Florida garden. And as always, to help me, I'm going to be using my handy dandy Wild Floridian garden planner. If you're looking for even more ideas to create the garden of your dreams, you can pick one up at www.wildfloridian.net/planner. Okay, let's start with vegetables. Have a lot of them. The May, and we are definitely at the tail end of spring, which means we are slowly closing out of classic options. We are past our cold weather crops. We are well past our warm weather crops. And whether you live in Central Florida, South Florida, or even North Florida, if you're zone 8, 9, 10, or 11, basically all we can grow right now is hot weather crops when it comes to veggies. But I think this is a really cool thing because most of these crops are not things that northerners would be able to grow, or at least not the varieties that we grow. Now, one that northerners definitely could grow, but they won't grow as well and it won't be as easy for them, is sweet potatoes. Here in Florida, it is ridiculously easy to grow sweet potatoes. It's literally one of my set and forget plants. Most of the work I do for this plant literally is just cutting the vines so they don't reroot everywhere. Legitimately, this can become a weed in your yard in Florida. I don't know if it's a bad thing. It could be a good thing, but you could potentially have sweet potatoes popping up all over the place. Now, when it comes to sweet potatoes in Florida, there are tons of varieties that you can pick. You can just go really simple and easy and just go to the store, go to your organic section of Publix, Walmart, Target, wherever. Basically what you're looking for, no matter where you go to the grocery store, is you're looking for an organic sweet potato. Organic sweet potatoes don't have the coating on them, which means they can sprout. And if they can sprout, you can grow them. You can go with that classic orange sweet type of sweet potato, but there are other varieties like white sweet potatoes, which I grow, which actually taste more like a really rich, creamy potato. There are purple varieties. There's a whole bunch of options. You can pick up options and starts at Southern Exposure, but honestly, it's one of those ones that's so easy. They're super easy. All you need to do is you could put them in a bed like this and then just put 3 to 6 inches of loose mulch on top, and they're just gonna grow. And what's really cool is what might throw people off if you've grown them up north is that in Florida they'll actually flower, which is a phenomenon that doesn't happen up north because sweet potatoes are a tropical plant. They like it hot. They like the intense sun. They like the humidity. So consider getting a sweet potato, the classic type, or one of the many other varieties. If you're a little sad that we're moving away from some of the classic vegetables, another hot weather crop that you might want to consider is Seminole pumpkins. Unlike most of our squashes, which were basically past, Seminole pumpkin is one of those subtropical, tropical types of pumpkins that you can grow through the summertime. They might slow down in the summertime, you'll find, and not really be producing, but once we cool down and the sun intensity drops a little bit for the fall, they'll start to take off again. And you may be wondering, if I start them now, will I have them in time for Halloween? Will I have them in time for Thanksgiving? And the answer is maybe you'll get a few. But what's really great about, if you get a plant started right now, if it's able to flower early in the fall, especially, it only takes a few months, depending on the size, for them to go from being a flower to a fully formed pumpkin. So if it flowers at the beginning of August, you have August, September, and then by the time you're at the end of October, you may potentially have some pumpkins ready. But never fear, you will probably have them in time for Thanksgiving. And if not, you'll have them in time for Christmas. Another plant you might want to consider starting this month is Roselle. Roselle is one of the plants that's in the hibiscus family. It's going to be really nice and tall. One of the things I've been thinking about is adding it into my beds because it will also help extend the life of things like my peppers as it starts to get a little bit more intense with the sun and the heat as we go along. So using plants like Roselle to kind of shade other plants will be a really advantageous thing. Plus, speaking of Halloween and Thanksgiving for later in the year, you can use these as a cranberry substitute. You can order seeds for things like Roselle at Southern Exposure. I'll put a link in the description for that company. And if you know of other seed companies that you highly suggest, of course, leave them in the comments below. Other hot weather crops that you can grow are things like okra and loofah, and you should really be considering things like loofah. If you were someone who put a lot of time and effort into tomatoes, we're kind of getting close. Not yet, but we are getting closer and closer to the time period where we're gonna clear out the tomatoes. So having some sort of plant that can go and cover your trellises while you're waiting for fall to come back around, not even worrying whether it produces anything, loofah could be an option. Another thing you might want to consider is some of those tropical type beans like Puerto Rican black beans, which would be another really good thing to start by seeding now to prep for the months of June and July to replace where you're going to have your tomatoes. Here's one of the great reasons, because those are nitrogen fixers, and your tomatoes use up a lot of nitrogen. This is one of the things when we think about succession planting, that we want to think about how all the plants are interacting. Now, one of the watch outs for all these crops that I just talked about is that they tend to take a long time to get to harvest. We're talking about not just 3 months, we're talking about 4, 5, 6 months to harvest. And why you want to take that into consideration is that if you are more interested in those classic, you know, cold weather, warm weather crops, your lettuces, your kales, your peppers, your beets, all those fun things, when it comes to fall, we're going to be picking up at the end of July and in August for a lot of those classic crops to be considering seeding and putting into areas. So what you don't want to do is get your hopes set on a very long hot weather crop that is going to eat up a bunch of space, and you're not going to really quite get the benefit of it. That's why in the Wild Floridian planner, I do put like a general days to harvest so that you can get kind of rough estimates of how much time is that plant going to be taking up space. Because for me, while I'm going to be doing some hot weather crops, my priority is more cold weather crops and warm weather crops. And if I get some hot weather crops, it's just like it's a bonus. I'm not like too worried about them, but like in general, I'm using them more to hold nutrition in the soil and keep out other plants and maybe create some longevity for some of my warm weather crops that are still surviving. Another hot weather crop that you should look for is Ajíes Dolce Peppers. Ajíes Dolce Peppers are actually a pepper that comes out of the Caribbean. They're so yummy. I love just snacking on these. It's like, combine this with like Everglades tomatoes, and that, like, I'm just like, as I go through the yard. And they tend to like it a little bit warm and a little bit hot. So consider getting Ajíes peppers started. You may need to put them in an area that has a little bit of semi-shade, so your classic vegetable garden beds might not be in the right spot, but they're definitely something to consider starting in a pot. Now, a tip for you guys, if you've thought about all those hot weather crops and they don't seem like of interest to you, one of the things you really need to be considering is that in the month of May, you should be clearing out most of your cold weather crops depending on where you live. So my South Floridians, I mean, at this point, I can't even imagine you have a cold weather crop left. Central Florida, I know we're still picking away maybe at carrots and beets and stuff like that, but in general, like our broccolis are probably bolting, our cabbages, like we're just at that time of year where it's just like they're out. The other thing is your warm weather crops only have a month or two. So at some point, like your beds are gonna be bare. So what are you putting in there? What are you gonna put in there? Because what we don't wanna do as Floridians is leave our beds bare for the summertime. Why? Because one, weeds. You're gonna get them in. Come summer, they're gonna go nutty if these beds are totally bare. 2, organic matter washout. Once the monsoon rains come with the summer, like everything, this is the time of year you go from having really black, rich looking soil to like all of a sudden it looks like total sand. And that's because the monsoon rains push all that organic matter out. And the way you can counteract that is with things that have root systems or by putting some sort of mulch over that. So start getting your game plan ready in May in preparation for monsoon season, so that when you start clearing out a lot of your warm weather crops in June and July, you don't leave your beds totally bare and a mess for the fall season. Another thing to think about in the month of May is that whether you still have a little bit of the cold weather crops left or you have some warm weather crops, you're going to see some things starting to bolt. If they are bolting in the month of May, like I still have a couple broccolis left, I am letting them go to flower. There's a couple reasons you might want to do this. One, you want to capture seeds from those plants that are like, you know, tasting really good. The other reason is flowers are pretty, but it brings in the pollinators. And most of our warm weather crops, while we might not be planting them at this time of year, our warm weather crops, like they need pollinators. Like you're not gonna get a great pepper harvest if you don't have bees hanging around. So something to consider if you don't have an area for flowers is to allow some of your cold weather crops just to continue to bolt in the area and then collect the seeds so you're ahead of the curve when we come back around for fall planting. A tip for your veggies is also in the month of May is you're gonna wanna stay on top of your harvest. You're gonna have a lot of warm weather crops coming in, your tomatoes, your peppers, all sorts of stuff. Pumpkins, I have some pumpkins over there coming in. So you wanna continue to grab those so that you don't start attracting wildlife and you've done a lot of work. You've done a lot of work to get all these plants. So make sure you make it part of your routine to at least once a day. I would say every day, but you know what, even I get busy. So, you know, every other day, try to make sure, have a pair of pruning shears and a bucket and just make your way through and just collect. Another general tip that I would give you guys, whether you're doing veggies, fruits, flowers, is that you want to stay on top of your watering. April was our driest month, but May is also still really dry. We don't tend to get into those kind of daily storms until June. On average, May tends to only get 2.5 inches of rain. So make sure that you're monitoring your soil if you don't have like an automatic sprinkler system. And also make sure that you do check your automatic sprinkler system. It's not unusual, especially as we get into the tail end of the drought season, is that there are water pressure issues. So even though your sprinklers are running, maybe they're not hitting everything. So just do a quick check at the beginning of the month just to make sure that everything looks like it's being hit and it's getting the full range of your garden beds, whether they're in ground or, you know, in a raised garden bed. Let's talk herbs. So if you notice, I'm not really giving you guys herb suggestions because in general, you don't want to be starting herbs at this time of year. My North Floridians, you might be able to get away with some of our warm weather herbs like basils and oregano, chives and thyme and stuff like that. But in general, we're going to stay away from planting new herbs out because one, it's getting warmer, but two, the sun intensity is increasing pretty rapidly. So in the month of May, we're going to be hitting UV index 11. Honestly, we were hitting UV index 11 at the end of April. So we're going to find that many plants that we're going to do okay throughout spring are starting to get really stressed out. So for my Central and South Floridians, unless you're dabbling into like your tropical herbs, like, you know, like your Cuban oreganos and stuff like that, then we're going to just want to stay away in general from herbs. Next up, let's talk fruit. So this is the time of the year if you are interested and been waiting to do those tropical fruits, whether it's going to be bananas and papayas, mulberries, star fruit, aka carambola, lychee trees, mango trees, sapote trees, black sapote trees, chimichamas, citrus. Pick a thing, do it now. Now, a couple things to think about when thinking about putting in some tropical fruits is number one, we're still in the drought season. So you're gonna need to baby these plants a bit in this month if you go and buy some and put them in the ground. Number two, I know we all get really excited about tropical fruits, and in Florida, we can grow so many unique things. So many things that nowhere else in the country can grow. But here are some things to think about. Number one, have you ever tasted this fruit before? I cannot tell you how many people have told me they wanna grow a tropical exotic fruit and they've never tasted it before. And while they're great investments and you could potentially save a lot of money, if you don't like this fruit and you're gonna wait 5 years to find out and potentially have like 20 pounds of it, maybe don't. So tip one, go find a store that actually sells it so that you can taste it before you put in a tree. Number two is fruit trees take up a lot of space. So while they can be really hands-off and very easy to manage and can produce a ton of food, which I totally recommend, if you're really trying to up the pounds of food that you grow so that you can bring down your grocery bill, sometimes fruit's not the best way to do that, unless you know that you eat a lot of it. I've had people tell me how many pounds they get from their mango trees, but they don't eat that many mangoes. And so what ends up happening is they're eating up a lot of space in their yard for a tree that they only need like maybe 5-10 pounds, but they end up with 50. The reality is fruiting plants take up a lot of space. So before you dive head in, you should put together kind of why are you interested in growing fruiting trees? What are your goals that you're trying to accomplish? And I will put this video in our playlist of the month, along with videos about Seminol pumpkins, bananas, papayas, mulberries, and other videos that you should check out as you consider your May garden plan. But this one in particular will take you through a lot of questions to help you identify what your goals are and why are you doing what you're doing before you put in a giant fruiting tree. I still recommend you do them. And my favorite, of course, is that you do bananas. Why? Because I know so many of you eat bananas. And here, it's so easy. You can pick up usually a plant between $25 and $50. There's a lot of varieties of bananas. Again, word of warning, because I know people are gonna get super excited and get interested in really like cool varieties like ice cream and, you know, blue bananas and all sorts of stuff like that. But like, again, try them. Because if you want just like a classic banana, the banana in your store is a Cavendish. You want to get a variety that's going to kind of taste like that, if that's important to you. So I grow Gran Banana bananas, which the big difference between Gran Bananas and Cavendish is not the flavor, it's actually the height of the plant. So Gran Bananas stay a little bit stouter and they're a little bit hardier and they tend to stay up a little bit better. For me with bananas, each one of these bunches is going to produce about 20 to 40 pounds and one plant will put out 2 to 3 bunches a year. And if you want to learn more about bananas, I will put that in the playlist for your May garden guide so that you can learn a lot more about bananas. But bananas, I know a lot of you eat them. Consider for sure doing bananas. Now, after bananas, I know a ton of us eat berries, whether it's going to be strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries. And if you're looking for something that produces a lot of berries, I mean like a lot, like 20 pounds, 30 pounds, 40 pounds from one single plant, mulberry. And what I like about mulberry, if you're a home gardener, is that they don't take up as much space if you get an everbearing mulberry. You can get things like Pakistani mulberries and those get like huge, But things like the Everbearing Mulberry stay much more compact. I mean, this is basically as tall as they get, just about 20 feet tall. And so you can still garden and grow a lot of food of other things, but get a lot of berries. You eat a lot of berries, mulberry is a great cost-effective plant. With the cost of the plant versus how much money you can potentially save, for me, it took me about 18 months to pay off the plant. Oh, and another bonus before we move on is that you don't have to let Everbearing mulberries get this big. You can keep them much more compact. If you look kind of just to the side of my backyard vegetable garden, you're gonna see this mulberry right here. It is only about 10 feet tall. And my plan is after it's done fruiting, it's because Everbearing mulberries are not actually technically trees, they're shrubs, so you can keep them way more compact by pruning them and pruning them. Also, it causes them to fruit more. And here's a tip for you guys, especially with things like Everbearing mulberries, is considering your placement of this type of bush tree to your vegetable garden. You know who loves mulberries? Well, me, and probably you too once you try one if you haven't tried them yet. But the others who love your mulberry are birds. And having a place for birds really close to your vegetable garden is a great pest management technique, because the birds, while they love the berries, they love bugs more than they love berries. So having a place where they can hang out nearby and take a look and watch for bugs in your veggies is a great way to do a very hands-off pest management. And it's one of the things that I talk about in my best-selling book, A Beginner's Guide to Florida Gardening, which you can pick up with the planner, which I'll put a link at the end. We've talked about veggies, we've talked about herbs, we've talked about fruit. Let's go talk about flowers. This is one of my favorite. And if you're in North and Central Florida and South Florida, gardenia. Oh, I love gardenia. It's got the look of a rose and the smell of citrus, and it's just, oh, it's so good right now. Everyone in my neighborhood has shrubs. You can just see them blooming, and before you even see it blooming, you can smell it. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous plant. And when it's not flowering, it's just kind of this evergreen, shiny leafed shrub. And what's great about it is it loves Florida's acidic soil. It likes that we have bad soil more than it wants to have good soil. So what a win-win for us. Gorgeous plant with gorgeous flowers and a gorgeous smell. You should consider adding gardenia. Other things that are going to be in bloom in the month of May, especially for North and Central Florida, is going to be things like our southern magnolia. You know, those giant flowering trees with the brassy leaves. And of course we have bougainvilleas in bloom, which, wow, just wow, wow, wow. Watch out for the thorns, but wow, they're so pretty. And when it comes to flowering trees, other than the southern magnolia, one of the big bloomers for this month is going to be Ponsianas. Oh, we love a Ponsiana. Talk about a gorgeous tree. That is so pretty. It's native to Madagascar, but who doesn't want a giant umbrella of scarlet, tropical looking flowers? I love this tree. I had this tree. I took it out of my front yard because that's one of the things about Ponsianas is this tree grows best in like a huge open field, which if you have a decent sized backyard, you could grow it. You won't grow much else because that thing will shade everything else out. But if you have the space and you want the blooms, Royal Ponsiana. Now, if you don't have the space and it's a totally different plant, is the Peacock Flower, aka a dwarf Ponsiana. They are not even related at all. It's also called the Pride of Barbados. This one has thorns, so watch out. But what's great about this is it also has very tropical looking flowers that butterflies love. So for those of you who are into butterfly gardening, let me tell you, giant swallowtails, cloudless sulfurs, monarchs, Gulf fritillaries, all of your bigger butterflies like this one, especially if you let it get tall. They love to come over my roof and use this one as a nectar plant. Oh, I almost forgot. Another tree that you should consider, and it'll stay small for a really long time, but in my yard, because previous homeowners planted it, it's huge. Frangipanis, aka Plumeria. The classic Hawaiian lei flower. Plumerias are amazing, and they come in a lot of different great colors, from white to pinks to magentas to multicolors. Mine's like a light pink with a yellow center. Yes. Now, when it comes to our native flowers, there are so many in bloom. This is a high bloom season for our native flowers. We have so many different plants that are in bloom right now. Everything from our tropical sage, blue porterweed, We also have things like our cone flowers that are blooming right now, even goldenrods. My lawn alternatives like water hyssop and frog fruit are blooming, which who doesn't love to have not grass and actually have flowers for their yard. This is a great time of year if you're looking to pick up plants and put them in the ground for native plants. You can get the benefit, especially if you're going to deal with perennial wildflowers that'll come back year after year. And if you want to learn a lot more about really good native blooms for spring, check out this video right here. I will add it into the playlist. And of course, well beyond that list, there are all the different types of native blooms that I have listed in the planner. And if you would like to pick up a planner to help you create the garden of your dreams, you can pick it up at www.wildfloridian.net/planner, or you can click this link right here. If you're looking for more resources on what you can be doing in the month of May, here's videos from talking about bananas, mulberries, papayas, Seminol pumpkins, and much more in this playlist to get you inspired to make the garden of your dreams in the month of May. Okay, I'll see you soon. Bye.